أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Esteemed speakers and distinguished members of the audience. My name is Aisha Ahmed and I am honored to welcome you all on behalf of Al-Fadel Academy. Al-Fadal Academy, born from a vision steeped in dedication and piety, stands as a beacon of light for the Ummah. It was conceived with the noble intention of providing the Muslim community with a collection of profound programs and workshops that resonate deeply with the soul. These endeavors are meticulously designed with the lofty aspiration of effecting a transformation within individuals, elevating their character to a state of dignity and honor. Our meticulously curated programs and workshops delve into various facets of personal development, spiritual enlightenment, and moral refinement. Each session is crafted with the aim of nurturing virtues such as compassion, humility, integrity, and gratitude, virtues that are not only celebrated in the sight of Allah, but also serve as cornerstones for a thriving, harmonious community. At Al Fidel Academy, we understand that the journey towards self improvement is a dynamic and lifelong journey. Hence, our offerings are diverse and cater to a wide range of interests and needs within the community. Whether it be through in depth Quranic studies, heartwarming discussions on the prophetic traditions, or practical workshops in Islamic ethics, our programs are tailored to meet you at your point of need. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on day 2 of this gathering, Surviving or Thriving, Embracing Mental Wellness Conference, which is an attempt to be dedicated to the vital intersection of Islamic teachings and mental health. In these unprecedented times where the challenges to our emotional and psychological well-being are more pronounced than ever, it is crucial that we come together to explore the wisdom of our faith and its application in the realm of mental health. In a world where the significance of mental well-being is gaining the recognition it deserves, our esteemed panelists are here to share their insights, expertise, and experiences. Today, we are privileged to have two distinguished experts in the field of mental health join us for an enlightening panel discussion. Sayema Zulfeqar, a dedicated psychologist with a profound commitment to Islamic and secular psychology, and Zulekha Rajani, an accomplished psychiatrist and psychotherapist with extensive experience in treating adolescents, young adults, women, and families. Our discussion today will revolve around the impact of case studies in the realm of mental health. These real-life scenarios provide invaluable insights into the complex interplay of psychological, emotional, and spiritual dimensions that individuals often navigate. Sayema and Zulekha will share their expertise, drawing upon their extensive experience and knowledge in their respective fields. Sayema Zulfeqar, with her deep understanding of both secular and Islamic psychology, brings a unique perspective to the table with her work, including the co-founding of Afiyah Counsel and Care, which has touched the lives of many, offering them vital support on their mental health journey. Zulekha Rajani, on the other hand, stands at the forefront of mental health care in Mumbai, India. Her specialization in treating adolescents, young adults, women, and families is a testament to a holistic approach to mental well-being. Together, they will explore the intricacies of case studies, shedding light on the diverse factors that contribute to an individual's mental health. Dear audience, the aim of our discussion today is to shed light on the various dimensions of mental health, explore effective strategies for support and treatment, all in the light of Islam. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists, Sayema Zulfeqar and Zulekha Rajani. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Zulekha and Sister Sayema.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah, we are delighted to have the two of you with us to take us through these case studies, which are very essential to be discussed because these are the things that we often see in the society, but maybe less touched upon and less discussed. So today we also have with us Sister Safa Ahmed, who is a part of the Al Fadal team, and she will help us facilitate this discussion with our esteemed speakers.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, distinguished speakers and members of the audience. It is my privilege to be sharing the screen with all of you and contributing, inshallah, to facilitate this discussion. So getting right into board, let's get into case study 1, where we will shed light on this. So Zara is a 30-year-old single woman who is working for an MNC in Dubai. And to the world outside, Zara seems to be leading a picture-perfect life. She's a popular Instagram influencer. She enjoys exotic trips and shops everything designer. So despite living every young woman's dream life behind closed doors, Zara is struggling with feelings of unworthiness and believes she is genuinely depressed. And she doesn't know where such feelings are stemming from. However, she is confident that such feelings are impacting her sleep, productivity, confidence, and her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Zara is convinced that Allah is angry with her and is seeking to punish her through mental health crisis. How would you help Zara? This is a situation that we often find ourselves in, people leading dual lives, people leading an existence that is masked with people pleasure satisfaction. So how do we go about this? Experts, please.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone, once again. And I think, like you very well put, Sister Safa, this is a situation that we come across very often. We see people living a very comfortable life from the outside, but behind closed doors, subhanAllah, we don't know what's really happening, right? So it is unfortunately a very, very common situation that we come across in our practice as mental health professionals. So I think before I let Zulekha, inshallah, share her expert insights, I think I'm going to dive into 3 main points when we work with Zara. So, of course, from a therapeutic perspective, once we begin working with Zara, and after having established, a good rapport with Zara, the first thing that we will be working together with is identifying the potential causes of these feelings of unworthiness that we see in Zara's case, right? So here, for instance, it's mentioned that she's been feeling unworthy, unloved. So we might need to figure out, where are these feelings originally coming from? Are they stemming from an experience in the past, maybe with her primary caregivers or parents, or maybe her interactions in school, right? So we might explore her past interactions and experiences to see where it's coming from. Secondly, after we've explored the potential causes, we might work on her on developing her coping skills, right? So here we see that Zara is actually leading a life that seems to be very, very difficult in terms of unproductivity, in terms of poor quality of sleep, in terms of her confidence, and most importantly, her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So we might work together in fixing her maybe sleep, right? Through sleep trackers and sleep worksheets and so on and so forth, maybe identifying strategies to help her sleep better in terms of, for example, setting the right temperature, maybe helping her do her adhkars before bed, maybe listening to the Quran, maybe reciting Surah Mulk before going to bed, right? So helping her with those strategies on practical aspects. Then in terms of productivity, of course, we could also help her, for example, prioritize, for instance, her deadlines, her schedules, look at how she's coping on that front, because we see that she's a single woman who's working for an MNC. So of course, we do expect that she may have certain commitments. So figuring out her priorities and helping her set those priorities and define them. And lastly, in terms of her underlying assumption that perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is angry with her and is punishing her, right? So of course, this is knowledge of the ghaib, right? Knowledge of the unseen. We don't know if for sure or if for certain that is the case. But when we're working with clients like these, we help them challenge such negative or self-defeating thoughts through a variety of cognitive reframing strategies. So of course, I could talk more about this, but when we're working with Zara, we could help her, reframe and challenge these negative and self-defeating thoughts, and maybe enlighten and work together on exploring the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Through gratitude journaling, for example. So I think that should be it from my side. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Zulekha?
Alhamdulillah, mashallah, you summarized it really well. I think these are all the different things that we could help Zara with. We could also explore and see Zara, what are her belief systems, like her core beliefs, and see if there's any distortion in terms of her understanding of the world and her understanding of life in itself in general. Islamically, when we understand that when we give anything more priority, or if we give any, relationship, be it that with ourselves and materialistic things, or with ourselves and a human being or anything, it's a perfect recipe for disaster. So we would try to explore her concepts of, and what is her relationship with Allah. Sometimes it's so when we're doing a mental status examination, we would actually ask her, what are her spiritual practices? How does she refill herself spiritually? What are the things that she does in order to help herself have that connection with Allah? There are times that when they are struggling, we actually just ask them, so what do you talk to Allah? As simple as, what do you talk to Allah? How does your conversation look like? So give me a brief snippet of how you talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes there are some clients who say, oh, I talk like a baby, or I say, this is also like, that's, that's good. I mean, everybody needs to have their own connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we explore things in those lines, and we help her to sit with a certain names of Allah. She'll help her to be more complacent, be more satisfied, like Ashakur, the all appreciative, or Alafu, or Al-Ghani, the self-sufficient. So maybe these are also some of the things that spiritually we can strengthen her core beliefs and see if there is spiritual.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair.
Just one little bit for Zara's case. This is like the two of you said, that this is something which is very, very commonly also seen amongst many people, where they live the life that everyone wants to have, but at the same time, we find that internally in their individual space, they might be struggling with a lot of things. Now, when any individual likes to come out of it, or once we tell them about the spiritual side of things, there are also many who say that we are doing it all. We are offering salah, we are doing dhikr, we are reciting the Quran, and everything that is required in fard as well as sunnah, we cover it all. Yet they say that we don't see things improving. We just see things coming one after the other. My mental state still stays the same. I still am sad. I'm not happy about things. And honestly, Sister Zulekha did mention, that we ask them, how is it that you're talking to Allah? How is it that your connection is with Allah? And from what they tell us, we see that they are doing it all. So how can we deal with this? Or is this something to do with patience, or that belief, or the trust, or how is it?
That's a very insightful question, and I think this is a grievance that a lot of clients actually come up with, right? So I've met a lot of Muslim clients who tell me things like, okay, I'm praying, I've memorized the Quran, I help people, I'm doing good, but why is my life so messed up? And I think my understanding of that would be of meaning and purpose in our trials, right? Too often we're so accustomed to leading a comfortable life that we only find joy and we only find contentment in a life of ease. And we don't look as trials and difficulties as an experience of meaning, right? As a sign of meaning, as a sign of attaining that connection, reattaining, re-strengthening that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think fundamentally, this is again, depends on where the client is in their spiritual state and in their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as practitioners, we help them understand that, okay, there is a sense of meaning, there is a sense of contentment, even in difficulties, right? There's always something to be grateful for. There's always something to be joyful about, even in moments of difficulties, or even in seemingly times of difficulties. So I think it begins with that. And I think, Zulekha, if there's anything else that you'd like to add, perhaps.
Yes, I think very rightly, as you said, Sayema, very rightly, as you said, the sense of meaning is very, very important for us to help them to understand. So their core beliefs, like what they are understanding of themselves, or what they understand about the world, the schemas that they have, right? So like Ashraf Ali Thanvi, one of the greatest Islamic psychologists too, because he's written more than 100 treatises in like a lot of papers and a lot of content on Islamic psychology. He was often found giving using narrative therapy techniques for clients as such with Quranic ayahs. So he would actually take ayahs from the Quran, which is very, so for example, if Zara is not finding a sense of meaning, then you pick ayahs from the Quran. And usually what is said to be done is to read the Quran. But then what really requires for them is to do serious tadabbur and tafakkur, like very serious reflection on certain ayahs of the Quran, which talks about your sense of purpose. Like if there are people who are suffering from addictions, then you make them go through the ayahs of the Quran, which talks about letting go things for the sake of Allah, and Allah being the utmost, like Allah, I don't know, like samina wa ata'na, and we listen and we obey, and ayahs in those lines, which will help you to navigate through those addictions. So I think using Quranic ayahs, using the names of Allah, helping them reflect, helping them make meaning out of their life in a way that is not just to understand what they think out of life, but is to understand their purpose. And like Sayema said, there is a huge culture, there is a huge movement where everybody wants to get away with pain. But then very clearly Allah talks in the Quran that He will test us. There will be situations where He will test us with loss of life, loss of livelihood, loss of wealth, and loss of health, and also taking them through the different anecdotes and different incidents from the Quran, right? Like when we see clients who come with us with family dynamics, then we take Surah Yusuf and we sit with Surah Yusuf and we make them seriously reflect on some of the ayahs of Surah Yusuf, like how Yusuf alayhi salam went through things at the hands of the family, right? So these are all things that, if done, even Tazkiyah therapy, I think, talks in lines of using the Quranic ayahs in order for it to reach the qalb, which can be restorative, reformative, right? So maybe using some bit of narrative therapy from the Quran of the pious predecessors who have passed it from the Salaf, using their lives and putting them through the life of the protagonist. So in narrative therapy, you put them through, you make them walk through the life and the eyes of the protagonist. So in Yusuf alayhi salam's story, you start relating with Yusuf alayhi salam. In Yunus alayhi salam's story, you start relating with people, right? So that's how you keep giving them something which they can take back, hold on to, reflect, they're not able to do it otherwise.
True. And I think I would just like to add one more point before perhaps we move on, is that in one of the ayahs of the Quran, I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, reminders benefit the believers, right? So in moments of trials and difficulties, we continue reminding each other of the nature of this life, the purpose of our existence. And like Zulekha rightly pointed out, maybe anecdotes of different prophets, including our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the moments of difficulties that he encountered during his life, and helping clients and helping people relate to those different experiences that he went through, inshallah.
All right, that was truly insightful. Diving straight into the second case study, where we see Rehan as a 28-year-old professional and working for an IT firm. He considers himself to be a practicing Muslim, diligently praying all the 5 daily prayers in the masjid, reads the Quran every day, and listens to various Islamic reminders on YouTube. However, lately, Rehan has been experiencing bouts of panic attacks every time he heads to work. And he describes feeling dizzy, nauseous, sweating profusely, and feeling as though his heart is about to pump out. Rehan is convinced that this is all in his mind and that maybe marriage will help to get rid of this recurrent panic attacks. How would you help Rehan? Now, that's a dicey situation to find oneself in. So what is the situation going to tailor a response for him?
Right. So I think before I dive into Rehan's case, just an important disclaimer here, which is an all wives' tale, that mental illnesses can be solved through marriage. Subhanallah. Unfortunately, this is something that we come across too often, where we have Muslim men who may be battling pornography or certain addictions, and they're being pushed by their families to get married so that a woman can step into their lives and magically change everything, subhanallah. So just a disclosure here, just a disclaimer here, that marriage does not solve your pre-existing mental health conditions, and that you might need to seek help, professional help, before you enter marriage, because that's going to put someone else's well-being at cost. So just a reminder on that. Now, coming back to Rehan's case, I think when working with Rehan, the problem here, the presenting problem here seems to be panic attacks, right? And his lack of understanding where those panic attacks are stemming from. And it also appears like Rehan is misinterpreting perhaps his panic attacks as being maybe a punishment from Allah, maybe a sign of lack of iman or poor iman or deficient iman, right? So the first step in Rehan's case would be always to potentially explore his core beliefs, his thoughts about what anxiety is and where is it stemming from, right? So once we identify what he thinks of anxiety, what he assumes are the potential causes, depending on that, we work together with Rehan to understand and help him basically psychoeducate what truly anxiety is. So unfortunately, once again, a lot of people mistaken anxiety to be a lot of things, right? Some people think it's an emotion, some people think it's just a state in your mind, and that it's just a phase. Some people also actually confuse anxiety as boredom, right? So it's important as a second step to psychoeducate the client on what anxiety is, its symptoms, how it feels like in your body, how it feels like in your mind, how it feels like in your relationships, and basically help them understand and explore different potential causes, which may be not necessarily always a result of deficient iman as people think. Could be due to maybe stressful life situations, could be due to trauma, anything, right? And after we've, helped Rehan psychoeducate that, we then move on to the more practical side, which is helping him learn certain anxiety coping strategies. So, for example, these anxiety coping strategies could be different. Some could be muscular in nature, some could be cognitive in nature, because anxiety is a condition that impacts your entire well-being, right? It interferes in your thoughts, it interferes with your behavior, it interferes with your relationships. So in all those aspects, some coping strategies, for example, would look like deep breathing exercises. So if, for instance, Rehan also complains of feeling constricted in his chest or difficulty breathing, right? So in moments like those, we help Rehan turn to certain deep breathing exercises. One of them is called box breathing, which is like you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold on to your breath for another 4, exhale for 4, and then, continue inhaling again for 4. So it's like, you keep doing it in a box format. And then it could also be spending time in nature. A lot of times we have restricted our lifestyle to being indoors. And interestingly, in one of the studies that I read, that mentioned that an average prisoner in the US and UK gets to spend 70 minutes outdoors. And us, on an average, as free abiding citizens, we hardly spend 7 minutes, right? So our environment really matters too. The kind of environment that we are in, the kind of air that we are in, really impacts our mental well-being too. So I think that should be it from my side. Any thoughts on this, Zulekha?
So I think, Alhamdulillah, you summarized it really well, Sayema. And yes, I think nature walk, nature therapy and everything is actually something that a lot of people have been advocating for, because subhanAllah, if we see, we're actually not spending as much time as we should be in the nature. I think Surah Fussilat talks about there are signs in, the nature and within ourselves for us to think and ponder and reflect. So whenever I come across patients or clients with anxiety disorder, and when you explore their lifestyle, when you explore their living conditions, you realize that, like the artificial light or the artificial source of air and cubicles and, no place and, a stressed lifestyle with, multiple areas of, binge eating and binge watching, humans were not really made to be so much in the artificial nature, like, it is to, like, go out in the nature, see, reflect and be, sit in the nature, sit with tafakkur and be in that state. Because nature, if you see all the guided meditation practices these days, like the videos, why are they using the backgrounds of waterfalls or the trees rustling or the stars, the galaxies? And recently we came across digital VFX, video, like, sort of a setup so that it could actually calm your nerves. And again, they're using the constellations and you are, artificially feeling that you're immersing your feet in the water and subhanAllah. So when nature is healing, like even if we see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made if you see Tibbi Nabbi, all these herbs, right? How so many of these herbs have medicinal properties for your sleep, for your anxiety, for, subhanAllah, so many different things that we see these as depression and so on, like Talbina, right? It comforts the heart. So using and going back to the Sunnah, going back to the basics really helps. So one other thing that we could explore with Rehan is go back and see the onset. So every anxiety or panic attack has an onset. So when it had happened for the first time, and that will help us to determine, is it work, is it family? So people say, I remember feeling like this for the first time when I was in a lift. So that claustrophobia. I remember feeling like this for the first time when I was when my parents were fighting. I remember feeling like this for the first time when I was writing an exam, when I was at workplace and I had to give a presentation and I felt that I have not prepared much, or I have made some errors in the presentation. So you go back and you see when the source, when it started, and then you also help them to explore their somatic, how their body is responding to anxiety. So these are somatoforms, because what you're feeling is actually manifesting into your body becoming tense and the heart acceleration. So I think one technique that I would suggest would be something like a body scan, which is a grounding technique where you start off from your feet and you bring all your focus and attention, starting off from your toes to your feet, to your ankles, to your calf muscles, and you go up until the head. A longer version of this for patients with high anxiety is JPMR, Jacobson's progressive muscle relaxation technique. So that could be done in a clinical setup where somebody's reading out the script to you and teaching you how to contract and relax each muscle, so that your body learns that when I'm in that situation, I need to relax. So you're teaching the body, like, each muscle, each voluntary muscle is gone. You take them through contraction and relaxation, starting off from the hands to the entire body. And then eventually so as they keep practicing this, when they are feeling the panic attack, their body has already learned that now that contraction has happened, they need to relax. It automatically, there's some sort of a classical conditioning principle that takes over, and there's some sort of relaxation that happens. So I think these techniques together to help him explore his lifestyle, explore where and how it started, or something like body scan, JPMR, box breathing techniques, diaphragmatic breathing, and correcting his food, bringing some bit of Tibbi Nabbi and herbs into the picture, and spending time in the nature, mindful walking, right? All of these, I think, will surely help Rehan, inshallah.
Inshallah, that was truly insightful. I'd like to add in another perspective that, usually what I see, and also personally, I am guilty of this, is when we have this need for perfectionism. Of course, we know that Allah is the perfect one and there is nobody who can, inch closer to this. But perfectionism, what we see, sets off a lot of anxiety attacks. And
Yes.
what could be, what can be that can be done in this case, as perfectionism, we know has no solution for it, but, we can try to get it, because of course, when it exacerbates all those feelings of inadequacy and fear of failure, and all these things need to be combated before you even, try to understand how to deal with it.
Great question. So I think when we talk about perfectionism and we come across people who are seemingly perfectionist, I think we need to help them reframe perfection to excellence, right? Because in our Islamic traditions, we know that we don't have a concept or an understanding like perfectionism, because perfection is an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what we have is something called excellence, ihsan, right? So we help such clients basically understand what excellence is, what ihsan is. And ihsan is doing something with excellence to the best of your potential and leaving the results to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So it is like how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam famously described in his ahadith that you tie your camel you do your part, and you trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for results. You trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for success, right? So you do something to the best of your potential, to the best of your ability, and leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is how I understand perfectionism and how I would reframe perfectionism to ihsan. And another element to ihsan would be ikhlas, that is sincerity. Doing something with excellence demands that we not only do it with with a high quality or with the best of our ability, but we also do it with a sincere intention, right? We do it sincerely, let's say, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, helping someone because you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you, right? Forgiving someone because you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you. So I think this is how I would understand. Any thoughts on this, Zulekha?
I think, mashallah, you framed it really well, in order to look at perfectionism to excellence, because that's something that our Islamic traditions hold really dear. And I mean, that's definitely deriving from Islamic traditions, alhamdulillah. I think in therapeutic lines, we can help them with some bit of exposure therapy, where we help them to understand that when they are, obsessing over little details to an extent that they're not able to finish the work. One strategy could be that you can actually break things down in steps for them. When they're not able, they're feeling very overwhelmed with, they need to be doing things in a certain way, in a certain manner, and then you lay down the steps and then you cut down the steps that are not necessary. Second is you expose them, you show them, for example, one thing that we recently did with one of the clients was she was practicing, she was feeling so like, her walk is not that good, that she would actually stand in front of the mirror and she would practice walking with the bag on. So we actually went to go around the hospital that I work. We put her bag on and we just made her go around and meet the staffs in the waiting area, meet the staff and meet the, different clients and everybody waiting in the waiting area. And once we came back to the room, I asked her, how many people did you notice, were they awkward? And she said none. And then I called some of my staff saying, did you notice how she walked? They said, no, we just saw her smile. We just saw her, how she was, talking so confidently, right? So we exposed, we bring that area for that perfectionism with some sort of a confrontation, that you're feeling that you need to do things like so perfectly and you've been practicing, and because you think people are watching, because you think that you want to, do things certain way, or because you feel that below that quality you cannot do something. But honestly, on the other side, nobody is even looking at things in a way that you've been critically looking at yourself. So therapeutically, I think some bit of exposure therapy and breaking down steps and taking off some of the steps is actually not helping them to progress towards the goal will help them.
That's an interesting take, inshallah. Hopefully, I'm going to imbibe some of these as well in my life as well, inshallah. Moving ahead, let's head to case study 3. Okay, this is an interesting one. Sarah is a 21-year-old who presents with various concerns, including anxiety related to academic exams, perfectionism, and a sense of being overwhelmed by the need to excel in various aspects of her life. She describes her father as a perfectionist and her mother as an individual with anxiety. Sarah has 4 older siblings with significant age gaps, and she has tended to compare herself to them. However, she has recently realized that these comparisons are not valid given the age differences. Sarah possesses good insight into her struggles and has a strong faith in Allah and Islam, which serves as an anchor for her. This was reflected in her TAT. She feels that her family has primarily focused on materialistic provision and has not adequately addressed her emotional needs. What's your take on it?
So, if we see Sarah's case, I mean, there are a lot of people who come with, it's a very archetypal case that we would call it. It's like a very textbook case that we would actually call it, because a lot of these days, I mean, there's a growing concern of people feeling they're not doing enough, they're not able to do as many things as possible. So Sarah, like if you see, like if you get into more details of the case, you would actually see how Sarah is somebody who's trying to do many things at the same time, right? She's trying to focus on not just like, of course, physical health is important. So there is physical health, there is some sort of a business, there's some sort of a helping another friend with, certain thing, helping a family member go through something. And then her own exams, her parents, like, when they are like, having issues, so sitting with them or with the older siblings. And I mean, so what happens is it's definitely a huge sense of overwhelming that Sarah came to us for the first time. But Alhamdulillah, when we did a TAT, thematic apperception test, we saw that her anchor or her understanding of Islam and was so strong. So Alhamdulillah, it's like you derive strength. You take that, because her understanding of Islam and her one of the therapeutic goals that she set for herself was to strengthen her bond with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And time and again, because TAT is a projected test, there are a lot of things that whether she wants or not, projected tests will bring about things that you wouldn't want to otherwise share, right? Because you have to write a story based on the picture, and usually the stories are coming in from a place of your deep core beliefs, your first understandings of life, your first thought processes, your schemas, and in those lines. So for Sarah, using Islam, using her relationship with Allah is definitely going to be one of the key areas of how we build her strength from. Of course, we'll be helping her with understanding what coping and anxiety is, some bit of understanding of, okay, so there is anxiety and what exactly anxiety looks like. And again, it's like to help her with some bit of active anxiety management and passive anxiety management. So all through the life, because she's been she's been around so many things, because she's been comparing herself with her siblings, her parents, her age, and so on and so forth. She has been living in an environment which is conducive of some bit of stress. So even by just scaling through in an environment like that will keep her baseline. So when you do a biofeedback, you will see that her baseline and relaxation is not that great. So you help her to understand active stress and passive stress. And you help her with strategies that can help her to cope with anxiety, be it active or passive. Also, I think the concept self-esteem, right? Because there was a lot of, even in her TAT, there was a lot of comparisons with the characters that were there on the test. So that self-concept, building her self-concept, understanding herself, understanding the I in the context of what the other protagonists and what other relationships are there in her life, that'll help her as well. Of course, some bit of anger management, because she's been scaling through with a lot of, dysregulated emotions. So some bit of emotional regulation strategies like resist or stop from DBT, that could also help. Family dynamics, I think in cases like hers, you'll actually sit down even with family. Like, so if there are 12 sessions that are planned, you actually sit down in 1 or 2 sessions with the family as well, a psychiatric social worker or a therapist, like, the team sits down and they work, because she's the index, you work with her, and the family also needs to be worked along with, because there is some bit of family dynamics that has actually played a huge role in her feelings of anxiety and not being able to face the world. Psychoeducation, definitely, where we talk about perfectionism, we talk about anxiety, we talk about breaking free from that past and future lingering. So by lingering too much into the past, you are bound to, if we have to define depression and anxiety, like in a word, then anxiousness and anxiety is related to the future, where you're constantly thinking, what next? Will I do things right? Or am I doing things right? Right. And when lingering in the past, then it's somewhere a byproduct of, like, you see some byproducts of depressive traits. So helping her to stay more in the present and using her accomplishments so far. So if she believes that she cannot do it, then we tell that, you're 21 years old and you've actually come so far. All the exams that you've given, or all the places where you thought you didn't have the strength, but you actually mustered the strength to actually, deal with them, and that you're having by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you said, you will do that. You will be able to, grounding techniques or muraqaba also. So there was a lot of sense of guilt related to the past, that, okay, I've like not obeyed my parents enough, I've back answered my siblings. So you talk about how Allah is al-afu. Al-afu is a quality that not just forgives but forgets, like it was as though never, something that never happened. So it's like a sheet, and the sheet is blank. It's not like something is written and it's striped out, right? So you help her to sit with the name of, Al-Afu, like in Muraqaba, and just focus on her breath and focus on the name and be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be with herself at the same time. So I think all of these techniques would definitely help, and you can actually, put all of these in different sessions and different permutations and combinations, in terms of, like, few sessions could be more in terms of attachment styles, few sessions could be more in terms of emotional regulation and distress tolerance skills, and few sessions could be more in lines of what are the names of Allah that you can sit with, right? So you give one spiritual strategy and one emotional regulation, or a JPMR, or a body scan, or a interpersonal skill in using the language in the right way to communicate her needs, all of that in the right stride, and you plan sessions so that she's able to navigate through having Allah as her core and having Allah as her anchor, inshallah. Sister Sayema, would you like to add something to Sarah's case?
I think that was very, very well put, Zulekha, and I think it was perfectly well done. So my only one of the things that I could only think of right now is that when we talk about Sarah having a sort of a difficult relationship, perhaps with her family, right? Like you rightly pointed out, helping her sit down with her family and maybe another family therapist to address any sort of emotional baggages that she has with her family from an Islamic perspective too, right? Because we know from our Islamic traditions, the status that parents carry, the honor that parents carry, right? So I think that's all from my side, but having to help her understand the honor and the position of parents from an Islamic perspective, understand the significance of maintaining ties of kinship, even though it could be very, very difficult to uphold those ties of kinship, and maybe taking parables from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, where he had difficult people around him, difficult loved ones around him, right, would add more meaning and help her understand her and make sense of whatever is happening in her life, inshallah. So
amazing message.
All right, the next case study is about Maryam. And Maryam is a 28-year-old woman who seeks therapy due to her codependency addiction. She's experiencing significant difficulties in her personal relationships, primarily with her husband, best friend, and sister. Maryam describes feeling an overwhelming need to please these relationships and ensure that their emotional well-being at the expense of her own, and with no boundaries for herself. She wants them to always be available for her, and no amount of quality time suffices. She has complained that they are not being there enough for her as much as she would like them to, and this has led to increased stress, anxiety, and a sense of losing herself in these relationships where she cannot seem to think of anything else. And she fears that her codependency is causing harm to both herself and these relationships.
Yes. So again, a very archetypal or a textbook, classic textbook example that we see in a clinical setup on a day-to-day basis. So, like if we see addictions, addictions has like definitely a broad spectrum. A lot of people recognize narcotics as an addiction, but we're using, drugs, like we're using LSEs and all this psychotropic drugs for recreational drugs, right? But not many understand that anything that evokes a feeling of dependency, a feeling that you're not able to do without, is an addiction. And thus, not just narcotics or alcohol or nicotine are seen as addictions, but even information and technology is seen as an addiction. ITA, Information and Technology Addiction Anonymous, where you have shopping addiction, where you have scrolling addiction, where you have streaming addictions. You're just constantly watching, like Netflix and binging on it, right? And you're just being on internet for the sake of being on internet. And even before you realize your productivity, pop-up says that you've been 8 hours and 10 hours in a day, right? So there are people who come to us showing the statistics, 10 hours, 12 hours. Imagine then what remains of the day, right? So similarly, even codependency, or as we say in short, CODA, is seen as a form of an addiction. And not many realize that, in relationships, and I mean, the neuroscience behind it is so amazing that when you actually see an MRI of the brain of a person who's addicted to a person, and or to technology or to drugs, you will not be able to differentiate between, okay, this is a CODA addiction or this is a narcotic addiction. So that's how severely these people or these clients also need help. So I think Islamically, to start off with, because Madam needs to understand that, the Islamic concept of relying on Allah's guidance can really reinforce the idea that the true security lies in one's faith and in the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? The Islamic principle that Allah is the ultimate source and He is the one who, ultimate reassurance and ultimate support and everything needs to come from Him. And there shouldn't be any relationship that comes in between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it needs to be you and Allah, and then it's you understanding yourself and you doing things that you need to be doing, and then of course all the beautiful relationships that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed into our lives for the purpose of sukoon, for the purpose of rahma, niyama, and sometimes even as a test, as we know it, right? So exploring her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be the core, where we understand that she definitely needs to be first with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and first understand with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then with anybody else, right? And then we will definitely explore her codependency awarenesses, right? So what are the bottom lines, what are the middle lines, and what are the upper lines? And definitely we will start to work with her in the bottom lines, and the target or the goal is to not be in the bottom line, where if the person doesn't calls you, then you start feeling devastated and your life feels worthless. Or when despite of spending this much of time, you feel it's not enough, and you start going through bouts of does the person love me? Does the person really want me? Does the person really need me? What is my sense of worth in the eyes of that person? So you will try to help them to not be in the bottom line and help them to scale through to the middle lines. And of course, the ultimate goal would be to help them to reach the upper lines. Some bit of emotional and spiritual resilience also, you should be able to teach her some bit of emotional and spiritual resiliency, some bit of integrating the Islamic concepts, some bit of understanding boundary exploration. Again, sitting with muraqabah, where you help them to understand Allah is Al-Ghani. Allah is definitely the ultimate source, like who is self-sufficient, right? We all do need people, but we don't need anybody more than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So Allah is Al-Ghani as a we help them to explore that. Right, and then we help them to understand more in lines of secure attachment styles, because I think her attachment with the husband, with the sister, with his best friend is very anxious. Like it's very anxious. So it's either very anxious or it's very fearful. Like they will abandon me, they will leave me, or it is that she derives, these relationships more in lines of reassuring her validation, right? So from this fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant or anxious avoidant, anxious preoccupied, how do you shift her to secure attachment style, right? So you help her understand attachment styles, and then you build her up from these patterns to a secure attachment, where you help her to be more secure in terms of her attachment and the feelings and the needs towards it. Some sort of a task record will also help her in identifying her communication styles, like the boundaries, like focusing on one boundary a week, right? So I think these are definitely things that could help Mariam. Psychoeducation also will definitely help in terms of like the nafs aql ru qalb model, where the nafs al amara is taking over and wants to just do the people pleasing, be there for people, and so scaling her through her nafsi model, where she understands herself in a way that the ultimate goal is to be nafs al-mutama'inna. And so I think it's going to be more aqli, where she understands and rationalizes how certain relationships, anything that in excess becomes bad, like your pills, like if we eat it in excess, it becomes poison. Anything in excess is going to be bad and poison or problematic. So understanding it from an aqli perspective, understanding it from a qalbi perspective, and understanding it from a nafsi perspective, putting it into an Islamic psychological modality will also help her to explore how the nafs al-amara is taken over, and it's just moving towards a desire of being there, spending time, and just just being overly there for the other person, without understanding that this is not healthy. It's definitely not healthy for her and her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think that's from me. Sister Sayema, would you like to add something to Mariam's case?
I think that's very well put, Zulekha. MashaAllah, I think you've covered almost everything. And I love how you give insights from an Islamic perspective, from a psychological perspective, and a neurological perspective. And speaking of neurology, actually, I was, when you first started talking about how codependency is a sort of an addiction that most people are not aware of, just to maybe add on to it from a neuroscience perspective, that addictions, whether it's a drug addiction, alcohol addiction, or even codependency, causes a release of a neurotransmitter which we call dopamine, that makes us feel good, right? So this neurotransmitter makes us feel excited, makes us feel happy, and can be released in a variety of exciting situations, from, for example, sexual relationships, to eating, something that we really wanted to, like a good dessert, right? And the way I see dopamine is a molecule of more, actually. This is because the more our environment or actions trigger the release of dopamine, the more we'll want our next shot of dopamine, which is why one of the reasons perhaps that explains her increased codependent behavior could be because she's just not satisfied with the same shot, right? She just wants more and more and more. So yeah, just something that I wanted to share across.
So That's so true, actually, because I think at the very base of that addiction is like it's never enough. Like no matter how much, it's never enough. Like you feel that that here is a cap and here I should be able to stop, but then it just keeps increasing and you just never feel that satiated and satisfied. So very
True.
well put, Simon. Yes.
Jazakallah khair.
SubhanAllah, I couldn't help but think about how in just 4 cases, we have covered a whole level of cause, effect, strategies, and I'm sure both of you restricted yourself given the time and of course the obvious constraints that are there. And if we could have this more often, I believe the the people are so much more well aware, and it is not just shoved under the carpet, and we actually tackle it in the way it has to be tackled. All of these issues, because these are not, we're not talking about very high level cases. These are things that I'm sure is there in every person's life at one stage or the other. They have felt this. So subhanallah, and all I can say is jazakallah khairan for bringing so much of perspective into this whole these issues that we're talking about, especially from the Islamic angle as well, and how it is not only restricted to just the secular way of dealing with it through medication and so on and so forth. If you actually get into the Islamic side of it, it opens a whole new level of understanding, and then it starts making sense finally. SubhanAllah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. Alhamdulillah. Because I think in I mean all these, like if you see all these case studies, there are certain elements that each one of us will be able to resonate to. Like, a lot of us suffer from perfectionism, a lot of us suffer from, like, there's some bit of an anxiety that you see, there's some bit of an OCD symptom that you see where you're obsessed with something or someone, or in lines or so. I think having more such discussions will open the space to help more and more psychoeducation and help more and more discussions. One, to help people understand that they're not alone, and they can seek help, and there are people out there who understand, and it's not a, like, you don't have to be a lone wolf struggling through your way when things are getting tough and overwhelming, right? And the second is, it just helps people to be more empathetic towards others, because we don't know what a lot of people are going through. So this is one thing that we usually say at the hospital, that it's so easy that people gain, when somebody's sick, physically, you actually go and visit them, and you're there with fruits and bouquets and wishing them a good health. But then when somebody is sick, not doing well, in mental wellness, that kind of an attention doesn't come simply because it's a thing where it doesn't bleed, right? So we keep saying that it's a illness that doesn't bleed, right? So, but the ones who are suffering, they come with, they are broken to a point where they feel that, so much of suicidal tendencies, ideations. So I think talking about it will help people to understand that they're not alone and they can seek help, and it'll also open gateways for people to start empathizing with people in their journey, that there's a lot more to it than what meets the eye. So we need to be more compassionate and kind and gentle towards people than we are in our approach.
Absolutely. And adding to that is, having to share this discussion with Zulekha, it's always a pleasure having to do this with you. And of course, bringing in an element of Islam, right? Bringing in an element of hope gives assurance to everybody, including you and I, that shifa, ultimately, healing, ultimately is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're all means, we're all sources. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to facilitate our affairs and heal everyone who's broken. Ameen.
Absolutely. Ameen. And likewise, Sayema, it's always a pleasure sharing the stage with you. Alhamdulillah. More to come, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. We should have more of these, inshallah. Illness that doesn't bleed, I think that's something that we all will have within our minds because it's absolutely valid. Jazakallah khairan kathira, Sister Sayema and Sister Zulekha, for your time and effort and being with us, with our audience today to help us inch a little closer to understanding ourselves and also in that process, understanding our nafs in the process. Alhamdulillah. To all our participants near and far, your presence has been instrumental in creating an atmosphere of shared learning and support. And your questions, contributions, and your engagement has definitely formed the heartbeat of this conference. We ask Allah to guide our deliberations and grant us the strength to carry forth the wisdom gained from this conference into our lives and communities. Ameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.